Good morning. Welcome to #LDeduchat, Leadership Development and Education. And we have another session for you. And this was a late arrival to our schedule, but I'm so glad that so many of you have actually joined in today. It's Sabrina Francis from Mindset Match who'll be looking at recovery and resilience in developing minds. And I'm going to leave her to discuss what that actually means. She will be sharing some resources online as well. And she has a website where she also has more information and videos and blogs that you can hook into to find out more about the topic area that we're talking about today. Over on Twitter today, we're at Chiltern TSA. We've got all the links to all the resources that we have had so far, as well as information about current sessions and sessions that are coming up, and also new announcements about CPD moving forward. As announced earlier on this week, we have, and you'll notice in the panel there, we've got #CPD EduChat, which is going to be our sibling brand as we're moving forward, which is CPD developed for schools, by schools, and that's for all settings in terms of whichever setting you're in, but also for all parts of the school. So whether you're working in facilities, whether you're working in admin, whether you're working as a classroom practitioner, whatever your sphere of expertise is within a school environment, we want to hear from you because we want to be able to share the wonderful work that you do out there in your schools. And that isn't just restricted to the UK. As you've known, that we've now actually had attendees from over 80 countries, and we really want to see what good practice looks like in other parts of the world too. So please do get involved. That's something that you can get involved in. If you haven't done so already, go onto the Eventbrite homepage where you'll find a link to a mailing list that will be using that information from the mailing list to contact you regarding CPD moving forward. So do sign up to that and give us feedback about sessions that you have attended. These sessions, as all our previous sessions, are recorded and are made available free and will be made free and continue to be made free. A few people have said, how long are they going to be staying up there? Well, we have no intention to remove them. So from that point of view, keep using them. It makes sense that they are there for as long as we possibly can. Keep them there. That will be up to YouTube, not us, whether we take them down or not, and I can't see that happening. So those sessions will be available. So when you start back in September and you're thinking, my colleagues haven't seen some of these sessions, do go out and share them. I will be retweeting every single one out over the summer month, just in case people have missed any sessions. So without further ado, let's jump straight into Sabrina's presentation.
Good morning and welcome everyone to today's webinar, where it's my intention to share with you some insights and to provoke some thinking around the developing mind and around recovery and resilience. Now, to do this, I'm drawing on my experiences, first and foremost as a teacher, having taught PE in a secondary school for over 10 years, but also as a school leader and as a specialist practitioner in a particular mind management model. And this mind management model has supported elite athletes to manage their minds through adversity and through the pressure cooker of expectation and constantly changing goalposts to reach their podium. It's also helped many other people in health and education and in business. But what inspired me to become a teacher and inspires me still today to support school communities was my own experience in my youth, where I had personal challenges because of what was going on in the background, the chaos that was my home life, and not having the tools and resources to deal with it at the time. So for me, those challenges seemed to go unnoticed, perhaps because it was a different era in education, perhaps because I did a really good job at covering it up, or perhaps because I didn't know how to ask for help when I needed it most. I decided to become a teacher and a guide, and to be that teacher and guide that I wish I'd had when I was young. And the move from PE to mindset came about when I read a book. Actually, I binge read a lot of books because it was the only time that I could ever find to read, but there was one book in particular that stood out, and it was the Chimp Paradox. And I came away from it thinking, wow, imagine if we taught this in schools, and if only I discovered this when I was young, what a difference to my life it would have made. And so I did tentatively start dabbling with teaching it to my Year 12 BTEC sports students when they'd finished their coursework, until a few months later I had a unique experience of working with the psychiatrist of 30 years and the author of that book, Professor Steve Peters. And of course with his team, I worked alongside them for a couple of years before I retrained in psychology, coaching, hypnotherapy and psychotherapy. And I still use the Chimp model in much of my work today, helping schools and helping others in purposeful professions. I think most importantly, with the background and the backdrop of what we're experiencing around the COVID-19 pandemic, the unfamiliarity, the loss, the uncertainty, the constant changing of goalposts, the venturing into new unknowns, there is no better time than right now to share a little bit of that wisdom and knowledge to help you to generate some new ideas or reinforce some great ones that you've had, to take some active steps towards developing even more resilient and resourceful mindsets. And so I'm really grateful to Arv and his team for making all of this happen today. So if you're watching this live, feel free to comment and ask questions. I'll get to as many as I can during the session, and I'm happy to answer as many as I can at the end as well. So if you're watching this recording and want to get in touch, please feel free to do so. Some of the particular challenges that I know many of you are working really hard on overcoming right now is the planning and the logistics for the full and safe reopening of schools in September or August, depending on when you go back. Knowing that the return next year will be unlike any other for you and for the young people in your schools and in schools across the world. Knowing that the business as usual, hit the ground running, will most likely fall flat. And many of you are building the systems and the learning to support recovery and to make a gentle and intelligent transition towards structure as empathetic and empowering experts. So today I wanted to lift the lid and shine a little light on what might be going under the hood in your minds and your students on the return. Now, if I had more time at this point, I would be getting into the nitty-gritty of the neuroscience and talking about reticular activating systems and orbitofrontal and dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. But we don't have enough time or headspace, I think, at this point in the year. So I'm going to dive straight in and share with you Professor Peters' model because he took the neuroscience, translated it into Noddy science to make it really easy and effective for people to use and apply in their everyday lives, which is great news for us who work at quite a pace, but also for the young people. So in a nutshell, your mind is made up of 3 key players. They each have specific functions and they work together as a team. Sometimes that team is pulling together in the same direction, and other times there's a bit of inner tension or conflict where what we really want and how we are being are at odds. So one key player is you. We call it the human. And this is your higher self, your best self, accessing your fullest capacities and competencies. It's the person that you want to be, you in fact already are. The human thinks calmly, rationally, logically, and with perspective. It thinks with compassion and empathy. It can recognise different points of view. It uses facts, truths, and evidence to make balanced judgments. And it enables you to focus on what really matters most. It helps you to plan, to organise, prioritise, execute and adapt a plan up to completion. Now, the role of the human is to learn, grow and adapt and develop the skills that you need to find your life purpose and to live your best life, whatever that is for you. And then there's your chimp, your monkey mind, if you like, which has an entirely different but important agenda. Its agenda is all about survival and keeping you safe, which is great in a life or death situation, like if a lion was to burst into the room, but not so good in our day-to-day living, like if you had to do public speaking or in an interview or deal with a challenging parent or an emotional teenager. It uses emotional thinking, goes on gut feelings and impressions. It's highly intuitive and jumps to conclusions. And sometimes those conclusions can be inaccurate. The hallmarks of chimp thinking can be to catastrophize, to be quite paranoid, or all or nothing terms. The chimp wants instant gratification or results or relief, and our chimp offers us all of the emotions on the whole spectrum, from joy and passion to grief and fear. When threatened, our chimps hijack us into a fight, flight or freeze response. The third part of the machine is the supercomputer, and this is kind of like your hard drive. It houses all of your experiences, all of your beliefs and automatic behaviours. So what you believe about yourself, others and the world. It's your internal map. It is a reference point that both your chimp and you, your human, can program and use to their benefit. Downloading and uploading programs, storing those automatic behaviours so that when you're on autopilot, you're not actually thinking. It's quite an efficient way of working. Some of those beliefs and behaviours will be helpful. We could call those autopilots, and some, let's call them gremlins, can be outdated and maybe need modifying or just be really unhelpful and destructive. I want to share with you a little video clip of someone who switches really easily and obviously from computer mode on autopilot, not thinking, then into human mode, thinking rationally, logically, solving a problem, executing a plan, until his chimp jumps into the driving seat and responds because it feels like it's under threat, it feels like it's under attack. And this quite likely came with some unintended consequences for this guy. So as well as responding to unfamiliar and threatening situations, our chimps also have a role in getting our emotional needs met. This is linked to reward pathways in our brains, and they push us to act, which means that they are hard to resist. Some of you will already be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yet through the lens of the chimp model, we recognise needs not as a hierarchy nor as a one-size-fits-all, but these needs are present in all chimps, but in different amounts for different chimps. So based on their nature, their genetics, and their nurture, so the types of environments or experiences that they've encountered. And particularly in this current climate that we've all been navigating, many of these needs have been unmet for a while. We have the ego drive, the need to feel valued, or the need for attention. There's the food drive, the extent to which food dominates our thoughts. Our inquisitiveness, how curious or strong the desire is to understand how people or things work, so that drive for learning. The parental drive, the need to take care and look after others. Power, the need to be in control of yourself or situations. Security, the need for safety, structure, familiarity. Shelter, the need for somewhere to retreat and to feel comfortable in. This could be the space and the time to think, so headspace, or it could be a physical space. Territory, how protective a chimp is of things, its spaces and other people sometimes. And then the troop, that need to belong or be part of a group or groups, that need for community, connection and acceptance of others.
Ross kissed me.
No! Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god!
It's unbelievable.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god! Okay, all right, we want to hear everything. Monica, get the wine and unplug the phone. Okay. Rachel, does this end well or do we need to get tissues?
Oh, it ended very well.
Oh, do not start without me! Do not start without me! Okay, all right, let's hear about the kiss. Was it like a soft brush against your lips, or was it like a, I gotta have you now kind of thing.
Well, at first it was really intense, you know, and then, oh God, and then we just sort of sunk into it.
Oh, so, okay, was he holding you, or was his hands, like, on your back? And, you know?
No, actually, first they started out on my waist, and then they slid up, and then they were in my hair.
Oh.
And then I kissed her.
Tongue?
Yeah.
Cool.
So in any developing or changing scenario, like the return to schools in September or August, the chimp will always get the first bite of the data. It looks into the computer and reacts without your say-so at around 0.02 seconds. The chimp is 5 times faster than you are, and it needs to be to keep you safe. But the part of the machine that holds the most power is the computer, because that's where the chimp looks. So the computer is 20 times faster than you are, and it's this part of the machine that you can program and reprogram to get ahead of the chimp. Now, just to be clear, this is not a get out clause. We can't just throw our hands up and say, oh, it wasn't me, it was my chimp. We are each responsible for our own chimps, looking after it, recognising its needs, and what it is that gets our chimps on the move. We're responsible for taking care of any situations, managing it, and putting the plans in place, and also apologising on our chimp's behalf if it causes any hurt or upset to others. But for the young people in our care, their minds are under construction. And since the brain develops essentially from the back to the front, the human that sits in that frontal area, the higher executive functioning part of the mind, develops much later. And it doesn't actually fully develop till around the ages of 25 to 30. So this is essentially what they are working with. So whilst they are responsible for their chimps, their ability to access and develop those skills starts with you, because you make a significant difference to educational progress and also emotional progress, to students' sense of confidence and self-belief that they can go on and achieve and do great things. And teachers have the greatest impact on those students with the lower level of parental education and resources at home. So when we're interacting with them, whether we're interacting on a one-to-one or with a group, there will always be potentially 2 of us and 2 of them. When we communicate actively and passively, explicitly and implicitly, and all of the silences in between. So there are a number of ways that you can support recovery and resilience in the young people in your care. These are my top tips. Firstly, it starts with you. What can you do? What steps can you take to get yourself in the best possible place? The summer holidays are about to start if they haven't already begun for you. And working with the reality of the current circumstances, what are all of the ways that you can get some high quality rest and recuperation? Take some time to reflect back on this year. What have been the highs and the lows? What are the skills and strengths and qualities that you have that have contributed to those highs? Give your chimps some bananas of reward and recognition. What are your key learnings this year around those challenges? What have you learned about yourself, about others, about this situation? And in looking ahead to next year, what is it that you will need? What steps can you take to re-energise and recharge yourself more often? You've all heard those sayings that you can't pour from an empty cup, and to fix your own oxygen mask first. Take the time to check in with your chimp each day and from time to time during the day, simply by asking, how am I feeling? And letting your chimp speak. Then check in with your human. You can ask questions like, what is currently most important to me? How do I want to be? And what do I need? You can recognise those moments when you are in chimp mode. So when you are experiencing thoughts, feelings and behaviours that you don't want or that are not conducive to the goal. What steps do you need to do to take care of it? Because when you are in a good place, you are best placed to help young people. And if you are able to role model that human, those higher executive functioning skills, that gives them the opportunity to learn. In supporting young people in all of your interactions, you can recognise what modes they're in and what resources that they have in light of their individual stages of development. And you can start to open up those conversations that allow them to exercise their chimps. What any chimp wants and needs is to be heard, understood, acknowledged, reassured and supported. So help their chimp and their humans to process the experiences that they've had and what they're experiencing on their return after the summer, as well as throughout the years of education. You can find creative ways with the resources that you have for them to get things off their chest in a way that is safe and supportive. So finding ways for them to connect either with you or with others, to talk and think things through with somebody who listens really well, without judgment or trying to fix them or tell them what they should do, but helps them by giving them time and space to figure out what it is that they need and explore options. You can help them to rebuild their confidence and resourcefulness by offering a framework for rebalance, reflection or feedback. So knowing that our chimps are wired to focus on the threats, what's missing and what could be better. Use the framework of a 5-to-1, 5 positives, be it about achievement or strengths or gratitude, growth or courage, for example, to the one thing that would have the most impact on their development or their progress, emotionally and academically. And finally, consider finding ways of sharing some of this wisdom with them. We talk about metacognition often these days in education, to really help young people to think about their thinking or about their learning process. And for me, it's about helping young people to unlock the black box and develop a shared understanding and a shared language around understanding their minds so it allows them to separate themselves from their unhelpful beliefs and emotions. Because it's in that separation, in that pause, in that space, that gap that's created, that they can then develop the skills to navigate their challenges. There is so much more that I want to share with you, but we are coming to the end of our time. If you do want to know more, then feel free to get in touch either through Arv or with me directly at Sabrina at Mindset Match. For those that need a quick getaway, thank you for listening, but more importantly, thank you for everything that you've been doing over this particularly challenging year to support young people. I know it's been one heck of a year. For those that are sticking around for a Q&A, I'm looking forward to answering as many of those questions as I can. Over to you, Arv.
Welcome back. I had an insight into this a couple of years ago when we had a look at this within our school as well. And there's a lot of questions that come out of a session like this. And I think that's the thing that you need to bear in mind, is that this actually really gets you to reflect. Now, I had the sessions with the students in mind, but obviously this is quite a unique situation that we're in, where everybody has been impacted with the current situation, and all of us are going to feel the impact of that moving forward. And a point of reflection for the leaders out there that are also exposed to the same stresses and strains that we all are and the students are, but we also have the job, the duty, the moral purpose to make sure that we look out for our students who are in our care. So it's quite a powerful message that we need to look after ourselves. So that's the questions that Sabrina will be answering in a minute, but I just want to remind you that over on Twitter today, do follow us at Chiltern TSA and do pose any questions or share your thoughts regarding this session or anything that you have come across in your experience that you want to share with people within the hashtag LDeduchat community. Use the hashtag to make sure we can find your comments. What I'd like to do now is actually just jump straight into the Q&A, if that's okay. So I'm going to introduce Sabrina Francis. Welcome to the E stage. I know that you have lots going on in the background over the last so I really do appreciate the time that you had, and I think that's been a common theme with a lot of our guests, that because we're working from home predominantly, all the things that normally happen at home we're exposed to while we're also trying to work. So I really do appreciate you juggling what you've had to juggle this week to get this done for us in the short time that we gave you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I've got the builders in, which they have just had the knock to say, please could you just keep it quiet for a little bit, because it can get quite noisy in the background. So yes, it certainly has been a situation for all of us, I think. Different situations. You know, I love that phrase that I think has been shared in the past. We're in the same storm, but we're in a different boat. We're going through the same kind of context and situation, but how we experience it is quite different. And those challenges.
I mean, it's quite rare. I mean, we've got Elizabeth Morales on here today, and she's joined us for most of the sessions, and she's actually sitting in Manhattan. But the connection that we have, like you said, we are in the same storm. And we have Freya from Rome, and we have people from Saudi and people from Sydney. Rarely do you have this kind of a platform where you actually have such a strong link with those people in terms of the current situation. Normally we're dealing with the political situations in our countries, but this is definitely something that, as horrible as the situation has seemed, it's definitely formed a bond and a connection with beyond our geographical borders, and there's a strength in that. I think relating to the work that you're doing, in some ways it does actually make that journey a little bit more manageable, should I say. The community is much wider, and the support network is far wider than it can do, because a lot more people empathise with the current situation. So just having a look at the questions, Sabrina, that are coming through, where did you want to start with?
There's some fantastic questions that have come through. We've got a couple from Jessica, I think probably diving in with her very first question, which there's quite a few things that came up for me around this. So just to read out the question, Jessica makes some great points by saying, you know, for some people who have experienced trauma, recovery becomes a battle. Getting better might take months, weeks, years, and some of the symptoms that people experience as a result of the trauma can last forever. And she kind of highlights body and mind change there. And her question is it possible to be resilient according to this new me, even though symptoms of trauma are still present? Or do people have to be resilient according to what the society expects from you? So as I was reading her question, there was definitely some resonance there in terms of kind of recognising that people who have experienced trauma, recovery can feel like a battle at times, and it is very much a process. It can take time, and depending on what it is that we've experienced, but also how we perceive or interpret those events and what that means for us. You know, they're even in a situation like, let's stick with the context of the COVID experience, you know, and the different experiences that might bring to perhaps the young people that we're working with. So just to give some more specifics, you know, we have seen a rise in domestic violence in homes during this time period. There will be more students that have suffered some kind of bereavement or significant loss at this time, and how they experience that, how they process that, how the support networks and mechanisms that they have around them is going to alter the extent to which they might experience the trauma. That link to body and mind change that she refers to really resonates with me. So I'm recognising that I'm bringing into this session today the Chimp model, which is quite a cognitive-based way of looking at change in behaviours, change in beliefs. And from some experience of working with people with a range of experience, some more trauma-based responses than others, I would agree that there is almost a dual or a combined approach that can be really powerful for people. So working with the body as well as the mind. The question around, is it possible to be resilient according to this new me? I think there's an element of managing expectations here, that this is a process. We can take some small steps towards being more human or becoming more ourselves. And sometimes we have to be realistic. We can't simply just, dream up what that other me or that version of myself might be and click our fingers, wake up the next day and expect to be that person. It does take some time. But the second part of her question around, do people have to be resilient according to what society expects from you? From my perspective, in a word, that would be no. It's very much about, what do you want for yourself? How do you want to be? And it's not about living up to expectations of others. Yeah, I'm just wondering, did anything come up for you around that question, that's provoked some thinking?
I think my challenge with the current situation is that normally you'll normally have one stable ship,
Mhm.
and which helps steady the one that's less so. So if you're going back to your analogy about the storm, and normally you're outside the storm and you're seeing the ship that's going through the trauma, going through whatever situation that they're going through, and you're able to sort of like guide and comfort and all those different things that you would employ as a human, but also then as a professional in terms of getting the focus back to what actually is going to make the difference. But like you're saying, we're in the same storm, and I think the danger is that you don't sometimes give yourself the time to recognize that you're in the storm, and that you also need that stability before you. So using another transport analogy, putting the mask on first before you help somebody else, that very much is something that I would be conscious of, that message not being lost moving forward, because I don't think we can actually provide the support that we need for our students unless we, like you said in your presentation, that we look after ourselves. But this is a process, and I think we've had a lot of sessions to do with culture and ethos, that have had us STEM going through it, and this isn't something that is a tick box, in my opinion, that you can say I've done that, I've done that, I've done that. This is something that you need to build, and we're all on a journey to create the culture, the ethos, the landscape we want in our schools. And you've got to start looking at at a granular level what you're doing as a school, and that involves how you deal with your staff, who will then in turn look after the students within the school. So I think the process for me is much greater, to build in resilience, to build in processes that actually enhance this model, or just a model that you want. That's my perspective on this, and I keep coming back to that.
I would second that in terms of the ways that I've worked to support schools. There's so many levels that we work at, and we might go granular, as you say. We might look at those the vision, the mission, also those systems that support what we're all here for, what is our why. It kind of links a little bit to Jess's second question around should resilience and wellbeing be embedded into the PSHE or PDC curriculum, or all subjects. From my perspective, it absolutely should be embedded, and it should be part of the subjects, but also part of the being in each of the members of staff that are working with young people. And not just in terms of the supporting the young people, but as you say, how do we support our staff? How do the senior leadership team recognise how they're being, their intentions, their impact on the staff that they're leading and managing? And that will filter down to support the young people.
And I've been in many schools and had various sessions linked to this and other things as well, where it's driven towards the students, which is as it should be. Sometimes you are left to question, I would like some of that too.
Absolutely.
So that I can actually be that person that a student needs me to be, and definitely for those people that are joining us and watching this on YouTube, that our NQTs are just starting out in their process. I think being mindful of your own well-being and your own chimp when you're dealing with the situation, because obviously a lot more evident earlier on in your career than later on in your career, as you learn processes to be able to deal with that and deal with situations differently. But it's definitely something that should be within the structure of the school rather than a subject or just a PSHE or whatever. It's good to have them there. I think if you're going to really embody the research and the science behind this, it's got to be a whole school approach.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. What else have we got?
We've got an interesting question from Belinda.
The chimp
brain and the reptilian brain.
So with the model that uses the reptilian brain, there were some challenges around. As time and science developed, there were some challenges around. Does that actually work? So to answer it really quickly and shortly, there is a link. So so both those the chimp model and the model that uses the reptilian brain are just different models of looking at the brain and simplifying what's going on under the hood. but it's not exactly the same. There are some differences, and there's, I suppose, like anything, there are some pros and cons. I think one of the reasons why I really like to use the chimp model is in the video clip that I showed with the chap who was kind of taking it all out on the photocopier and the printer, you know, that in his movements, you know, they were almost chimp-like. You know, we're quite closely related to, you know, we share a lot of our DNA with chimpanzees. Yeah, I think having that, using that metaphor of the chimp, for me, really resonates, because I can really notice my chimp activity. Although my chimp is less likely to externalize behaviors and look aggressive or angry. It's much more kind of behind the scenes and what's going on internally for me. But yeah, it's just a model that really resonates with me.
How about, I'm trying to think, Elizabeth's asked a question about students using SEL about our chimps.
How do we speak to students using SEL about our chimps? I might need a little bit of help with the acronyms there from you, Arv.
What do you reckon, Elizabeth? Are you going to expand on your on the question? If you just pop underneath exactly the context that you're looking for, just while we jump to, we'll have a look at Rekha's question there. Societal expectations do impact, and how that part of the mind, in the mind, is silenced because all we have to do needs to be expected. All of us have the need to be expected and loved.
I'm wondering if Rekha was meaning accepted and loved.
Yeah.
But absolutely, yeah. I mean, part of our chimp, it is our social brain. So our chimp will be hypervigilant as to what are the expectations of me here? How am I being measured? What will success look like? What do I need to do to be accepted and loved? Yet at the same time, the chimp also just wants to be accepted and loved for who they are. So there is an impact, absolutely, and it's recognizing that the impacts that those expectations might have on our chimp, the emotions and feelings that we experience as a result of that. You know, how do we go about managing the chimp? And that might be around some helpful truths or autopilots that we can develop into the computer that help us to keep perspective and help our chimps to focus on what matters most. So, for example, one truth that Steve Peters uses often in his model is around the 1 in 5 won't like me. So whereas the chimp just wants to be liked, not everyone that you meet is going to like you and accept you and love you. Of 5 people that you meet, 1 will think you're amazing, absolutely love the bones of you, and would love to spend more time with you. 3 will think you're all right, but 1, you're just not their cup of tea. And we don't need to expect our chimps, or to allow our chimps to want to be loved and liked by everyone, because it becomes unhelpful.
Just going back to Elizabeth, I mean, I don't know how broad she was referring to SEL. So social and emotional learning, I think she was referring to, and so it's to do with the process on how we process our knowledge and learning. So I don't know if you're familiar with that at all.
So what I'm understanding there, and you might need to correct me if I've misunderstood.
Yeah.
So we're talking about students who may have some challenges around the processing of emotions, or?
I think it's more of a model that's used to help students so it's all to do with that developing mind. So it's a process that's used to, and I'm only from my...
Yes, yeah.
So it's a model that's used to help students process the knowledge and deal with their behaviours. So it's not necessarily people that have got challenges. It's just, so I suppose it's like a mechanism that's used to introduce this whole idea about emotional behaviours and how we process knowledge in a positive way. I think that's what Elizabeth means, and that's what the bits that I've read about it before. So I don't know whether it's something specific or whether it's just to do with that. So how do we speak to students using SEL about?
So it sounds like there may well be some overlapping there without really knowing anything about that particular process. It's difficult to comment, but
that's fine.
It could well be a model that kind of sits across. And I mean, if the chimp model sounds like an easier way for young people to
Yeah, she has added something at the bottom there. Do you so it is about what you were kind of saying, which is, do you recommend using the Chimp to help students who are having challenges understanding their emotions?
I think it could be helpful. I mean, give it an experiment and see what happens. But I mean, Professor Steve Peters used the Chimp model working with children as young as 2 years old, kind of with little sock puppets. You know, this is the chimp and this is the human. And even at a really young age, they're kind of able to get the basic concept that we have two thinking brains. And yeah, the Chimp model, I think, can be quite a playful way of looking at what's going on underneath, but also useful in creating that time and space.
Okay, is there any other questions on there that we haven't looked at? James, staff hit pressure points and their chimps can sometimes overrule them. How can we best support our colleagues to recognise that their chimp is on the loose without holding a red rag to a bull?
Yeah, this question definitely resonates, because the chimp model and having an awareness and knowledge of the chimp model can be really helpful, and it can kind of create that shared language. But I've also seen in some schools that people can kind of get the wrong end of the stick, and when they're noticing a colleague in chimp mode or in survival mode, I mean, sometimes this does work quite well. It depends on the relationship, I think, between the members of staff. You know, if you've got a strong relationship, you could have a quite direct conversation around, you know, is that your chimp, or is this you, or is this your chimp? And some of those questions can kind of provoke some kind of calming down from chimp mode into human. But it can also, like that red rag to a bull statement there, it can also provoke and kind of escalate a chimp response and be unhelpful. And I think if in those moments where we recognise we perhaps haven't been helpful, it's just a case of apologising and just recognising, okay, perhaps that wasn't the right approach in that circumstance.
Yeah, I'm just going to just call into reference something that was raised with me. Apologies if I'm throwing you a curveball on this one. So looking at the current climate at the moment, we've done stuff on Black Lives Matter to do with anti-racism, and there's a lot of, I would say, uneasy is probably not the right word, because the work to do with the Chimp Paradox is recognised, and it is based on science. There were two issues that came up that staff raised with me. One was to do with when your audience isn't white and you're using the word chimp, has that ever caused an issue or been challenged? And secondly, can some of the traits within our diverse communities be labelled as chimp, but actually they are culturally correct? And so the classic case of a black woman who is assertive and powerful, it can be labelled as aggressive, which can also be labelled as that's her chimp side. And in terms of that's her chimp coming up because she's not coming across in our culturally accepted norm. So is there an issue to do with that? So any of the research that you've looked at misdiagnosis of chimp?
So the first thing that came up for me then is around that kind of misdiagnosis of chimp. And I think I need to kind of highlight that one way to really get somebody's chimp out of the box and on the move, to provoke a reaction as opposed to create a calming space to kind of settle the chimp, would be to kind of point out and diagnose, you know, that feels quite judgmental, and chimps really don't like judgment at all. So I think wherever you're coming from, I would say don't kind of point the fingers. It's not helpful. In terms of your first question around the use of the chimp word being unsettling and uncomfortable and helpful, I think it's important that we recognise that could be the impact because of people's experiences. And I think in those circumstances, what might be done is creating a different metaphor, because the chimp is just a metaphor for this emotional part of our minds.
So it's almost like the primitive. So from I mean, the chimp works quite well because it talks from an evolutionary, from a point of view. So in terms of that, sort of the resonances in terms of the similarities, and also to do with, it can be also labelled to do with a developmental issue in terms of, but the chimp isn't bad.
No.
And that's the problem, is that, so I grew up in an era where chimp was used in quite a derogatory way, for example. So straight away that brings out my chimp.
Yeah,
in terms of that, I find it difficult to process things, and because I focus so much on that rather than looking at the song, so that can be an issue. So I think, what advice, like you said, use other ways of getting the message across. Are there things that use this model but could be delivered in different ways that you're aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of, do they already exist? Not that's within my awareness. That's so if you didn't want to use the chimp model, the reptilian brain is another model. I think Kahneman's got system 1 and system 2. There's another model that uses kind of red brain, blue brain.
I've seen
there's
that one.
loads of different versions out there. I would certainly, and have in some situations, used the principles of the chimp model, but avoided using the chimp as the metaphor. Actually, it can be quite empowering for people, and it's easier to do on a one-to-one basis, but it can be quite empowering for them to choose a metaphor or an animal that really resonates with them. And there's a great little hypnotherapy script that I use that's called The Animal Within. And it's a bit of a process that you might take somebody through, and they will think of an animal that feels empowering for them. And we go, great, let's use that. We'll work with that instead.
Yeah. So I mean, my point behind this is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of the model is good, and if there are any, because I think there's a lot of people looking at their curriculums at the moment, in terms of to do with diversifying, to decolonisation, to do with diversity, and there's lots of things that research-wise sometimes also need to be adapted to make sure that we allow for that diverse audience to engage with it positively and not just switch off from it. So that was my main idea behind it, is that people shouldn't shy away from research. They may need to remodel how it's presented, and the person that's going to be best judged to do that is going to be the school, in terms of how they know their schools, they know where the sensitivities might be, and really adapt the work to actually do that. Maybe that's something that could be looked at moving forward as well.
Absolutely. I would certainly say with the schools that I've worked with, where it's been the most exciting and engaging and impactful work is actually when it's been a collaboration, and schools have said, we like this bit, but this bit needs tweaking. Great. My chimp loves that anyway. Yeah.
I mean, the feedback that I've had from my home school has been amazing. Absolutely amazing. With you going in, I got an email straight away saying you've got to have Sabrina on, and so from that point of view, it's just such a positive thing that can be in schools at the moment, especially as you said, moving forward into who knows what in the next few months. So as I said, it's something that people need to give time to, I think.
Yeah, I think with any new things, it's kind of recognizing what might be happening in the mind when we're presenting with something that's a bit new and a bit different. It's kind of maintaining that open mind, and I think always taking the bits that really resonate and work for you, and for the bits that don't quite work, either ditch them if you can, or put those ideas across and let's co-create something that's even more powerful. So
what's the first thing that somebody should do if they want to move forward with this, Sabrina? If I've got people there and people watching on YouTube, and they're thinking, I love the idea behind this. Where do I start? What do I do? What's the first thing they should do?
Yeah, well, there's lots of things that they could do. So, I mean, if you've got some time over the summer holidays and you want to dive into some reading, I would definitely recommend Professor Steve Peters' Chimp Model book. And there is also the Silent Guides, which has been written with kind of educators in mind, probably slightly more directed towards primary school teachers, I would say, perhaps, or would need a bit more adapting for secondary. But also get in touch with me, if you would like to start a conversation around how this might work, or what is it that I'm doing in schools currently, what's working well. Absolutely, drop me an email at sabrina@mindsetmatch.com. I'd be more than happy to have a conversation and see where it could go.
Absolutely, and I can't recommend it highly enough in terms of students and staff that have been involved. It was almost like somebody joined up the dots for them, in terms of it made a lot of sense, and it was really positive. and they felt that it was going to have a huge impact moving forward. So so from my point of view, I know that it had the impact that you're talking about from a receiver's end. So thank you so much. I think we've covered everything that we need to cover, if that's so. Does Sabrina have a blog or a website? Yes, she does, and she just mentioned that, and she has got an email address. If you contact us, we will pass on anything to you, Bess, and anybody else out there. But also, if you are on Twitter, as I know you are, Bess, I have tagged her into most of the posts this morning. I'm sure that she will do so. If you use the hashtag Sabrina of hashtag LDeduchat, if you want to pop your email address on there and your blog address as well, and also your website address, I'll make sure that it gets retweeted and shared as well. And I'll copy it and I shall send it out with the post-session email as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And so that's the end of another session. But just before, I'm just having a look at the time. I think we've got time. James, are you going to join us? James has put his shirt on. Welcome, Mr. Hashtag CPD EduChat.
Thank you for having me back.
Yes. So we've between me and you, we've been tweeting out things that are coming up. And Sabrina, just want to bring you into this. What I think would be really good is that we should have 20-minute hit sessions on different aspects of the work that you do as part of CPD EduChat for classroom practice and for going up to middle leaders. That's something that I think we could definitely build into the program. I've just sprung that on you, James. I hope you don't mind.
Right, we can manage that.
I just think it'd be really, really good to have that part of what we're doing moving forward as well. Are we up for that, Sabrina?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Good.
Happy to help in any way that I can.
Brilliant. Okay, James will be in touch and he'll organise that with you.
Fantastic. Lovely to meet you, James.
Likewise.
Right, James. So tell me about it. What's happening?
So off the back of the success of Leadership and Development EduChat series, so a lot of these webinars that we've been doing, there's been a kind of gap in some respects that's been kind of addressed by a lot of the participants, where people are asking for support in areas that perhaps kind of a more, let's say, grassroots sort of level of education. So looking at classroom practice and looking at kind of more subject specific and niche sort of areas. And one of the things that we want to do is, going forward over the future, the next academic year, is provide people with an opportunity to have some development in those areas. So there's going to be a lot coming up over the course of the next year in small, manageable, digestible sort of 20-minute, 30-minute chunks that can be consumed completely flexibly. So what we're saying here is we're going to produce YouTube videos to support staff at schools. And I want to be specific that it's staff at schools, not just teachers. So there is a need. We've seen it in schools where, our inclusion teams that aren't necessarily classroom practitioners. We've got TAs that work with students that don't necessarily get the development that they need. We've got office staff and admin assistants that, again, sometimes get forgotten within these CPD sort of platforms, network managers and so forth. We are still going to cater for teachers as well, but we want to kind of bring in the whole of the sort of engine of the school with that. So the idea being that we're going to have subject specific, led by teachers for teachers, as you've kind of mentioned, schools for schools, and really kind of hopefully sort of deliver 2 sort of bite-sized sessions per week. So with a release date on a Monday and a Thursday of a sort of 20-minute video or so that will kind of just bring to light some thoughts and some things that you can use in your sort of day-to-day job. And we're going to publish this out over Twitter. It'll be all through our Chiltern Teaching School Alliance YouTube page. And there'll be a lot of sort of traffic, I imagine, with people just trying to get those bite-sized bits and pieces. But equally, we're happy to reach out and work with people from the teaching community, both locally and nationally and internationally. So if it's a case that people have got some ideas that they want to share and some great practice that they want, please do reach out to us, and we'd love to get involvement from everyone.
So if Bess wants to do a session on SEL, that would be something that would be welcomed. Is that 100%. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So, and I just want to clarify what you just said. This is every nook and cranny of the school, in terms of wherever you are within a school and you want to share expertise to do with that area. So if you're a pastoral assistant within a year team or in a house team or whatever that might be, and you've got some fantastic insights on how you can develop that role, that's something that they could share with us.
Exactly that, yeah. Every sort of aspect. So as you kind of mentioned, facilities management. How many times do we see any CPD for our site agents.
Yeah.
You know, we've already got plans for looking at network management, because network management is, most schools will have 1 or 2 people working in their school networks, on the IT networks this is, and won't necessarily have that opportunity to reach out and speak to other people. So we want to provide them with an opportunity to get that development alongside our teachers that are in the classroom, because our bread and butter is obviously our education in the classroom, but there is a lot more people working in a school than just the teachers.
Do you think it could also be expanded to the different roles that the governance has as well? So sometimes there may be somebody who's on finance within governance and stuff like that, or is that something that would be beyond CPD EduChat? Because there are a lot of teachers and staff within schools that want to become governors as well, and perhaps they don't have the insight into what's involved. Is that something that we could do as well?
I think we could do it. I think it would be blending with the LDeduchat stuff, because obviously we had some sessions on governance as well and finance already, but there's no reason we can't build on that as well to kind of sort of cover those sort of points as well. So we know that, you know, I know that Arthur, you've got a governance background, so it might well be you just volunteered to do that one. So
damn. No, we shall find some people that are experts in this. But I think the key thing is that this isn't just us as a trust or as a teaching school doing this.
No.
This is people that from the wider community that we want involved in this. And as much as we will facilitate it, is that right?
Yeah.
And organise it and quality assure it, but we won't necessarily produce it.
Exactly that. So we want the content to be driven by people that are passionate about something. So, for example, I'm a computer science teacher, but I might choose to do my content on effective use of TAs, for example. Something that's not necessarily relative to my subject, but it might be something that I'm passionate about.
Brilliant.
And that's what we're looking for.
Okay. So more information is going to follow, no doubt. Yes?
Exactly.
And we're reaching out as we're speaking at the moment, aren't we? And have we got any initial sessions lined up already?
Yeah, so on the 20th of July is when we launch. We're looking at growth mindsets for the 20th of July, and you'll see more about that on Twitter. Following on from that, I think we're going to jump straight into making our MFL engaging at all levels. So trying to keep a balance of some curriculum-focused work, but equally as well, sort of more wider pedagogical stuff, and then obviously introducing some of the sort of back end of education within that as well.
So from the 20th, we're going twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays, is that right?
Mondays and Thursdays, 9 a.m.
And that's going to be dropped into YouTube every week until...
So those that have subscribed will get notifications, and those that haven't subscribed, so you can get those notifications.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that little bell at the top of the YouTube page, that gives you the notification. So as soon as you click that little bell and you say that you want to get notified, every time we drop some content, you will get a notification say that Chiltern Teaching School Alliance have just uploaded some more material. You haven't even got to think about it. Okay. Thank you, James. No doubt I'm going to drag you back out here at some point between now and Friday. I can't believe it. Yeah. Right. So end of nearly the end of another week. And it's our penultimate week. I can't believe when we sat there in March, late March, planning our sessions for April, May, June and July, that we get to this point and had such support from the wider community. So I really do thank all the people that are watching this today and also on YouTube for the continued support that you give us. And do, as I said, watch this space about what's coming up. And tomorrow we have Tom Rogers from Rogers History, who'll be looking at how we maximize progress within the history classroom. Do jump onto Twitter. He's very active on Twitter. He has a lot of resources. He's got his own blog and website where there is so much for you to pick through. So do feel free to have a look at that before tomorrow's session. And we'll be looking at then launching our final week on #LDeduchat. And we've got Claire Robbins, we've got, just trying to think, we've got Lorraine Hughes doing inclusive curriculum. We've got Friday, we've got our final session, which is by Diana Rasaji, who's been looking at courageous leaders at all levels. And then we've dropped in 2 sessions because we couldn't make do with just having Monday, Wednesday and Friday. We have now got Abid Khan looking at safeguarding provision within schools on the Thursday, that's 16th, and that is all on Eventbrite. And then yesterday I launched it's actually a session that I will be emailing you about, and I'll be sending out links to the Zoom Direct for that one as well, even though it is on Eventbrite. But we're looking at bereavement in relation to COVID-19, and specifically the area of Luton. This is something that's been put together by Luton Borough Council for us, and they really wanted to share that with us, and we really wanted to share it with the wider community as well. So this is looking at COVID-19 and bereavement within our immediate area here, but I think it will resonate with a lot of people no matter where you are. So that's what we've got lined up for you next week. As always, so much that we cover in a week, and I look forward to seeing you at our next session. Do subscribe on YouTube, do follow us on Twitter at Chiltern TSA. This is #LDeduchat, Leadership Development and Education Online. See you soon.
Take care.